So we are back, and I'm going to be talking about name changes that happened to certain pay-per-views over the course of wrestling history. And I wanted to start off with Ring of Honor because Ring of Honor, number one, it's the topic of our conversation, but also this one is somewhat interesting because it kind of had a name change, but it also had a numerical change visually. So this poster behind you was the 1-year anniversary that happened on February 8th, 2003.
Okay.
Now, when they first did this, it was 1 O-N-E year anniversary. Second, spelt out, third, fourth. But when it got to the 5th year, they actually did a festival. So it was called the 5th Year Festival. They did it in New York, Philadelphia, which is what you see here, Dayton, Chicago, Liverpool, and the finale. And that happened from February 16th, 2007 to March 4th of 2007. But right after that, they started to name them after the 6th anniversary. They decided to go with the numerical version. So 6TH. 7th TH, 7th, 8th, 9th, and that's how they've been doing that, and that's how they're probably going to continue to do that till the 19th anniversary. Now, the 18th, they didn't have an 18th anniversary for obvious reasons.
Right.
That happened in 2020. So,
or it was going to happen in 2020.
Yes,
we had tickets to that show.
We did have tickets. I'm so upset about that, too. God damn it, I forgot about that. So, fantastic story. Now, this is the January 6th show in Tokyo Dome for New Japan. The reason that it's named that in the iconography of Wikipedia is because it went through 4 or 5 different name changes.
Because different companies had control over
No, actually, it was all New Japan.
Oh, it was?
Yes, it was all New Japan. The issue is that it was always called just January 4th show in Tokyo, and the name was like the nickname of it.
Oh, okay.
So Fantastic Story was actually the second name. So they went from Super Warriors in Tokyo Dome to Fantastic Story in Tokyo Dome to Battlefield to Battle 7 to Wrestling World, and they did this from 1996 to 1997. Then they had Final Power Hall in Tokyo Dome.
Jesus.
And then they went back to Wrestling World from 1999 to 2004. Then they went to Tokon Festival Wrestling World 2005.
Okay.
Then Tokon Shondu Chapter 1 in 2006. And then finally they ended up at Tokyo Dome. Or Wrestle Kingdom. In 2007. And it's been Wrestle Kingdom since then. And they went from doing Roman numerals up till 7, and then they started doing 7 to what we know now.
Right, with the Arabic numerals.
With the Arabic numerals. So that one was kind of funny to see because they just kind of did a bunch of different things, but I understand why they did it because the thing is that this show always happens on January 4th. Like, that was always the first show or the only show that they did for Wrestle Kingdom.
Right.
I'm sorry, did you have something to add before we move on? Okay, let's talk about In Your House. Ah, yes, the classic In Your House. Now, do you remember the premise of the original In Your House?
Yes. So, WCW started to...
This was WWF that they did this.
Well, I know, but WCW started producing monthly pay-per-views. And WWF was not doing monthly pay-per-views at the time, so they introduced this series of pay-per-view events in order to kind of fill in the gaps between the major shows.
Yep. So the In Your House show started May 14th, 1995, and the gimmick of In Your House was they gave out a house. So they had a drawing for everybody at attendance and who purchased the pay-per-view, and they just gave you a house. There was some speculation on if these people actually got the house or not. I tried to find some information. I kind of looked, but this weekend was really busy, so it was hard. Now, In Your House started with just In Your House 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, right? Until 1996, when In Your House... Good Friends, Better Enemies started, then they started to do like a catchphrase like what January 4th did. So then they started doing Beware of Dog and International Incident, blah, 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 right?
And some of these names became actual monthly pay-per-views.
Much later.
When they started to do it like that. But yeah, In Your House was originally conceived as a way to fill in the gaps for pay-per-views.
Yep.
And we got some names like Vengeance, I believe, came out of this. Judgment Day.
No Way Out.
No Way Out came out of this.
So here's what happened. In 1996, they actually had the In Your House as the catchphrase, not the main name of the show. So they actually switched it. From that to what you see as Ground Zero was the first time that Ground Zero In Your House. Then you had Bad Blood In Your House, Degeneration X In Your House, so on and so forth.
Right.
And that continued on till St. Valentine's Day Massacre In Your House in 1999. Now, what happened there is that the lineage of this pay-per-view actually offshooted to what we know now as Backlash.
Right.
But there was the same pay-per-view. It was at the same time, so Backlash took over, and then they just started naming the pay-per-views like Backlash, Judgment Day, stuff that you saw from In Your House. There was No Way Out in Texas, Unforgiven, Over the Edge In Your House. We don't necessarily talk about that one. Fully Loaded, Breakdown, Judgment Day, Rock Bottom. So they always did that. Obviously, they brought it back with NXT TakeOver In Your House of 2020. One of my personal favorite In Your Houses.
And then they continue the tradition in 2021, and I believe they had it this year as well, right?
Yep, NXT In Your House was in 2022 on June 4th.
Yeah, so they still have it.
Now, this one is weird because Final Resolution never necessarily stopped, but there was a year in 2008 where there were two different Final Resolutions.
Because they switched, they switched the pay-per-view schedule around.
Yes. So what they did is that the Final Resolution show was going to be in December, but it was in January. So they had the one in January in 2008. Then they had the one in December, and the one that came up after that was renamed to Genesis. But this is kind of one of the only instances when a pay-per-view name happened two times in 2 different months.
Right.
I just kind of want to talk about that because I liked it.
Yeah, that was when they shuffled a couple of pay-per-views around because reasons.
Yeah. Well, now this one was in 2008, so this was the only shuffle up until they had the financial woes in 2011, 2012.
Right. But what I'm talking about is that they had they shuffled around Genesis, Final Resolution, and I can't remember one other pay-per-view.
Yep.
In the schedule, so that's what happened there.
Yep. Let's talk about Hard Justice. Speaking of pay-per-views and TNA, Hard Justice was a pay-per-view that they introduced in 2005, and it went all the way up till 2012 because... I'm sorry, not 2012, excuse me. 2010 when they switched it to Hardcore Justice for the ECW reunion because they signed a bunch of ECW guys.
Right.
Now, they had Hardcore Justice, and they actually still do the show named Hardcore Justice.
Yep.
But they switched the name again to Impact Wrestling's Hardcore Justice in 2013, and they made that part of the weekly television show that 1 year. Then they had it in 2014 as Impact Wrestling Hardcore Justice.
Yeah.
And they continued to do that, and then they actually switched it back to just Hardcore Justice in 2021 as one of the Impact Plus specials. Now, this one is interesting, too. I don't know why. I was kind of on an Impact kick here. But Redemption. It was the only one time that did this, but this was not necessarily a specific show transition, but this was a company transition.
Yes, this was the first show, I believe, under
Scott D'Amore as the executive producer. So they only had the 4 pay-per-views a year during the dark days of TNA.
Right.
But then when it came back with Anthem having full control over it, the full transition happened with Redemption.
Right.
Then they had Rebellion, and they had Homecoming.
Right.
So they had a bunch of the pay-per-views.
So they have 4 rotating pay-per-views per year now.
Right. And then they have the Impact Plus specials and all that fun stuff too. NXT TakeOver, and this is where we're going to be ending off. So NXT was always NXT TakeOver for the first one, and they started to do NXT TakeOver Fatal 4-Way, Our Evolution, etc., etc.
Right.
But then they started to do, after the end, they started to do the name of the towns that they were in.
Right.
So they started with Brooklyn, then it went to Respect, London, Dallas, Brooklyn 2, Toronto, San Antonio, etc.,
Right.
etc., right?
Right, because they were in the same towns that major WWE pay-per-views were in.
Yep. So then they started to bring in like these interchangeable ones like War Games.
Right.
They started to bring in, and then War Games became like a regular
a fixture,
And then
right.
XXV was another one that they brought in. War Games again, Portland. Then they had the In Your House. So that's when it switched over
in
to
2020. Obviously, they had In Your House because of the pandemic.
Yep.
And then they stopped doing kind of the numbering before they ultimately just stopped doing the NXT takeover in general.
Yep,
right.
because this was the transition day where they had the black and gold versus the new people.
Right. Versus 2.0.
Right.
And that was the last.
NXT TakeOver 36 was the last NXT TakeOver in that lineage, but now they have NXT War Games, NXT
Right.
In Your House, because there's always NXT TakeOver in Your House, NXT
right.
TakeOver Vengeance Day.
But they don't have that anymore.
No, that does not exist anymore. Now they just do NXT, the name of what it is.
Right.
How that's going to continue to last is beyond me, but that was just a transition from the black and gold NXT to the colorful NXT.
Right, to the 2.0 colorful one that we have now.
Right. So those are just some kind of name changes, and I wanted to bring that up because there's speculation that Ring of Honor will have different names for certain pay-per-views. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea, but there's just been some talks about that. So when we come back, we're going to be having a much different style for our wrestling showcases. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about Death Before Dishonor.
All
so
right.
stay tuned for that.